blood, power, and betrayal. Inside the Tudor dynasty, for over a century, one family name struck fear and fascination into the hearts of England, Tudor. A dynasty built on bloodshed, sustained by betrayal, and ultimately consumed by its own ambition. This is the story of how a Welsh nobleman's grandson became king, and how his descendants would reshape England forever through murder, marriage, and merciless political cunning. August 22nd, 1485. On a muddy field in Leicestershire, the course of English history changed forever. Henry Tudor, a man with a questionable claim to the throne, faced King Richard III in what would become the last battle of the Wars of the Roses. By sunset, Richard lay dead, and the Tudor age had begun not through divine right, but through the brutal mathematics of medieval warfare. Henry VII knew his crown was built on shaky foundations. His claim to the throne came through his mother, Margaret Beaufort, whose lineage traced back to Edward III through a legitimized bastard line. In medieval terms, this made him barely more than a pretender with an army. Henry VII's genius wasn't in his royal blood. It was in his understanding that legitimacy could be manufactured. The Tudor rose, combining the red rose of Lancaster with the white rose of York, wasn't just heraldry. It was propaganda. But propaganda alone couldn't secure a throne. Henry VII ruled through fear, crushing rebellions with calculated brutality and maintaining a network of spies that would make modern intelligence agencies envious. Every smile in his court masked potential treachery, and Henry never forgot it. The Tower of London became Henry's favorite tool of statecraft. Potential rivals simply disappeared into its walls. Edward Plantagenet, Earl of Warwick, spent 14 years imprisoned there before Henry finally had him executed in 1499, his only crime being born with a better claim to the throne. When Henry VIII ascended the throne in 1509, England rejoiced. Here was everything his father was not: a young, handsome, athletic, and generous. The miserly, paranoid first Tudor was dead. Long live the Renaissance prince who would make England glorious again. Henry VIII's early reign was a festival of excess. Where his father hoarded gold, Henry spent it on wars, tournaments, and palaces that dazzled European visitors. But beneath the pageantry, the Tudor gift for ruthless politics was already emerging. Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon wasn't just personal, it was the continuation of his father's foreign policy by other means. But when Catherine failed to provide a male heir, Henry's personal desires and political needs collided in the most explosive way possible. The king's great matter, his divorce from Catherine of Aragon, was Tudor pragmatism at its most audacious. Unable to convince the Pope to annul his marriage, Henry simply declared himself head of the English Church. It was a move that would cost thousands of lives and reshape English religion forever. If the Tudors had a signature move, it was the carefully orchestrated execution. Henry VIII turned state murder into political theater, using the block and the scaffold to send messages that echoed across Europe. Sir Thomas More, Henry's former friend and Lord Chancellor, discovered that Tudor friendship had sharp limits. When More refused to acknowledge Henry as head of the church, the king, who had once called him his greatest counselor, ordered his head removed with chilling efficiency. But perhaps no execution revealed the Tudor character more than Anne Boleyn's death in 1536. The woman Henry had moved heaven and earth to marry became inconvenient when she too failed to produce a male heir. Henry's solution was characteristically direct: fabricate charges of adultery and treason, then remove the problem permanently. Anne Boleyn's execution wasn't just about Henry's desire for a new wife. It was a demonstration that even queens weren't safe from Tudor wrath. The message was clear: cross the king, and not even the marriage bed could protect you. Thomas Cromwell, the blacksmith's son, who became Henry's chief minister, orchestrated many of these executions. But Tudor service was a deadly game, and Cromwell eventually found himself on the wrong side of Henry's anger. In 1540, the man who had sent so many others to the block followed them to Tower Hill. Henry VIII finally got his male heir when Jane Seymour gave birth to Edward VI in 1537. But Jane's death 12 days later reminded everyone that Tudor triumphs came with Tudor tragedies. Edward's reign would prove that male succession was no guarantee of stability. Edward VI's reign, controlled by Protestant regents, pushed England toward radical religious reform. Centuries of Catholic tradition were swept away as the boy king's advisors used his authority to reshape English spirituality. But the greatest Tudor drama was yet to come. When Edward VI died in 1553, the Tudor succession plan collapsed into chaos. Lady Jane Grey, proclaimed queen by Protestant nobles, lasted 9 days before Mary Tudor's superior claim and Catholic support swept her from the throne. Jane's reward for being a Tudor political pawn was the headsman's axe at age 17. Mary Tudor's triumph seemed to promise reconciliation. England's first undisputed queen regnant had overcome rebellion and political manipulation to claim her birthright. But Mary had inherited more than the Tudor crown. She had inherited the Tudor talent for systematic violence. Mary's attempt to restore Catholic England turned into a bloodbath that earned her the name Bloody Mary. Over 280 Protestant heretics were burned at the stake during her 5-year reign, their ashes a testament to the Tudor belief that religious unity was worth any price in human suffering. The burning of Thomas Cranmer, architect of English Protestantism, revealed both Mary's determination and the peculiar Tudor sense of justice. Cranmer's final act, thrusting his right hand into the flames because it had signed his recantation, became Protestant propaganda that would haunt Catholic England for generations. Mary's burnings weren't random acts of cruelty. They were calculated attempts to terrorize England back into Catholicism. The Tudors understood that sometimes fear was more effective than persuasion. When Elizabeth I became queen in 1558, she inherited a kingdom torn by religious warfare, threatened by foreign invasion, and suspicious of female rule. What happened next was perhaps the greatest performance in Tudor history: the creation of the Virgin Queen. Elizabeth understood that being a Tudor queen required theatrical genius. She transformed her unmarried status from a political weakness into a source of mystical power, presenting herself as married to England itself. Every suitor became a diplomatic tool, every rejection a calculated political move. But beneath Elizabeth's carefully crafted public image lay the same Tudor ruthlessness that had marked her predecessors. When Mary, Queen of Scots, posed a threat to her throne, Elizabeth's response was predictably final. After 19 years of imprisonment, Mary met the headsman's axe in 1587, another victim of Tudor political necessity. The defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588 became the defining triumph of Elizabeth's reign. But victory came not just through English seamanship. It was the culmination of decades of Tudor diplomacy, espionage, and the calculated use of religious division to weaken England's enemies. By the 1590s, the Virgin Queen's performance was becoming increasingly desperate. Elizabeth's refusal to marry meant the Tudor line would die with her. But admitting this reality would have undermined the entire mythology she had spent decades creating. The Essex Rebellion of 1601 revealed how precarious Elizabeth's position had become. Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex, her former favorite, attempted to seize power in what became the last great plot against a Tudor monarch. Elizabeth's response was swift and final. Essex joined the long list of those who had underestimated Tudor resolve. Elizabeth I died on March 24, 1603, having ruled for 45 years. With her death, the Tudor dynasty ended as dramatically as it had begun, without a direct heir, leaving the succession to be determined by political negotiation rather than bloodline. The Tudors weren't just England's most famous royal family. They were its most successful practitioners of political violence. From Henry VII's calculated murders to Elizabeth I's spy networks, they understood that power wasn't inherited. It was seized, held, and defended through whatever means necessary. The Tudor genius wasn't in their royal blood. There wasn't much of that to begin with, but in their understanding that monarchy was performance art backed by the very real threat of death. They made the crown itself into a weapon. The Tudors ruled England for 118 years, transforming a medieval kingdom into a Renaissance power through a combination of political brilliance and strategic brutality. They broke with Rome, defeated the Spanish Empire, and created the foundations of modern England, all while leaving behind a trail of bodies that stretched from Bosworth Field to the Tower of London. Their legacy isn't just in the churches they built or the territories they conquered, but in the demonstration that absolute power, wielded with intelligence and ruthlessness, could reshape the world itself. The Tudors didn't just wear the crown, they redefined what it meant to be royal, and England would never be the same. Blood, power, and betrayal, these weren't just tools of Tudor rule. They were the essence of what it meant to be Tudor. Egyptian pharaohs were considered married to the goddesses of Egypt. Female pharaohs navigated this by emphasizing their roles as divine mothers and protectors of the realm. The forgotten world of Egypt's female pharaohs teaches us profound lessons about power, gender, and the deliberate construction of historical narratives. For over 3,000 years, women regularly ruled one of history's most powerful civilizations as absolute monarchs, military leaders, and living goddesses. They built monuments that still inspire awe, led armies to victory, and governed millions of subjects with divine authority. These remarkable women were systematically erased from history, not because they failed as rulers, but because they succeeded too well. Their achievements threatened male-dominated power structures that preferred to pretend women had never wielded such authority. Every time we discover another forgotten female pharaoh, we're reminded that women's exclusion from power hasn't been natural or inevitable. It's been artificial and deliberately constructed. These ancient queens prove that women have always been capable of absolute leadership. During their reigns, Egypt experienced some of its greatest periods of prosperity, artistic achievement, and territorial expansion. Their success demonstrates that diverse leadership strengthens rather than weakens civilizations. Egypt's female pharaohs didn't just rule, they ruled extraordinarily well. Their stories were hidden, but their achievements were real. These forgotten queens remind us that women have always been capable of absolute power. We just haven't always been allowed to remember them. Today, we choose to remember, honor, and learn from the remarkable women who ruled as gods in ancient Egypt.